Dinner was supposed to be quiet. That's what my mother said on the phone earlier that day. Nothing fancy, just family. In our house, just family was never harmless. It was where people said the things they'd been rehearsing in their heads for years and finally decided not to swallow. My name is Claire Dawson. I was 36 that winter, living alone in Charlotte, North Carolina, working long weeks as a project manager in sustainable construction. I showed up to my parents' house that night on time, empty-handed, except for a bottle of wine I knew no one would open. The porch light flickered when I stepped inside. The air smelled like garlic and overcooked chicken. Somewhere behind the wall, the dishwasher hummed too loud, too steady, like it was trying to drown something out. Lily was already there. My younger sister sat at the head of the table, legs crossed, phone face up beside her plate. The screen kept lighting up. Notifications, comments, likes. My mother hovered near her shoulder, Pagian ruing over like a proud stage mom. She just hit 10,000, my mom said, smiling, before I'd even said hello. 11, Lily corrected, not looking up. It jumped while I was driving. My dad laughed, a short, approving sound. That's momentum, he said. That's what success looks like. I took the empty chair near the end of the table, the one with the loose leg. I'd sat there my whole life. No one asked about my drive. No one asked about my week. We sat. Plates clinked. Silverware scraped. The overhead light buzzed faintly, casting everything in that dull yellow glow that makes faces look tired and older than they are. Lily talked about a brand deal, about a wellness retreat she'd been invited to, about how exhausting it was to stay creative when people expected so much. My mother leaned in. That's such a gift, honey, to inspire people like that. My father nodded. You've always had that spark. I chewed slowly. The chicken was dry. I swallowed anyway. Someone asked Lily what she planned to do next. She shrugged, casual practiced. I'm just letting the universe guide me. My mother laughed, delighted. You were always meant for more. That was when she looked at me. It wasn't sudden. It never is. It was the slow turn of her head, the narrowing of her eyes, the familiar calculation behind them. She smiled, the kind that looks kind to everyone else. Claire, she said, you know, if you had even half your sister's spark, life would be easier for all of us. The room went quiet in that unnatural way. The dishwasher clicked off. The hum stopped. Even Lily glanced up. My father didn't stop her. He nodded. Once. We just wish, he added calmly, that you were a little more like her. That was the first snap. Not loud, not visible, just something internal, clean and sharp like a wire pulled too tight and finally breaking. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask them to repeat it. I didn't defend myself. I set my fork down, carefully. I felt the edge of the table under my fingertips, solid, real. Then I said evenly, you should probably tell her she's about to start covering the mortgage. Silence hit the room like a dropped plate. Lily coughed, sudden and ugly water spilling down her wrist. My mother's smile froze, half-formed, then collapsed. My father stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. What Lily said. I pushed my chair back. The loose legs scraped the floor, loud and wrong. I stood smoothing the sleeve of my jacket. That's what you wanted, right? I said. More like her, more contribution. My mother blinked fast. Claire, don't be dramatic. I didn't reply. I walked toward the hallway. Behind me, Lily laughed nervously. Is this a joke? My dad cleared his throat. Sit down. We're not doing this. I reached the front door. My hand rested on the knob. Claire, my mother said, her voice tightening, you're overreacting. That was the second snap. I turned back just long enough to look at them. All three. The table, the plates, the empty wine glasses no one had touched. I'm not, I said. I'm done. The door closed behind me with a soft click. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. My breath came out fast. My phone buzzed in my pocket before I reached the car. A text from Lily. What the hell was that? I didn't answer. Before we go any further, let me say this. If you've ever sat at a table where you felt invisible, if you've ever been the responsible one who got blamed instead of thanked, if you've ever had family treat you like you only mattered when you were useful, take a second. hit like, subscribe, stay with me. Because stories like this don't get loud right away. They get quiet, and then they cut deep. 5 years earlier, I would have apologized. I would have driven back, knocked, explained, smoothed it over. I was good at that. I'd built an entire personality around being agreeable, dependable, invisible. Back then, dinners were predictable. Lily talked. My parents praised. I listened. I worked long hours at a firm downtown managing construction schedules and budgets that ran into the millions. I dealt with inspectors, engineers, deadlines that didn't care about feelings. But at home, none of that mattered. What mattered was presentation. Lily's life was visible. Mine was stable. Stability in our family was not impressive. It was expected. Whenever I mentioned a project, my father's eyes glazed over the moment numbers came up. Whenever I talked about work stress, my mother checked the oven timer. But Lily could mention a mood board, and suddenly everyone leaned in. "It's not that we don't appreciate you," my mom used to say. "You're just steady." Steady was another word for boring. So I learned silence. I learned how to make myself smaller without disappearing completely. I learned how to leave early, how to send checks instead of showing up. And when things started going wrong, when my father's business deal soured, when the bank letters started arriving, I learned something else. They didn't call Lily, they called me. That night in the driveway, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. I let it ring, then a voicemail. Her voice was tight, controlled. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said, "but embarrassing your sister like that was cruel. Cruel." I leaned my head against the steering wheel. The street light above flickered once, twice. Another message came through immediately after. "We were only trying to motivate you," she added. "You've always been so sensitive." Sensitive. That was her favorite word when she wanted to erase damage without taking responsibility. I started the car. As I pulled away, the house shrank in my mirror. The porch light went dark. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from my mother. "Short, sharp. Don't make this into something it isn't." That was the third snap, and the last one that night. 5 years earlier, I still believed effort could balance the scale. I believed if I showed up enough, stayed calm enough, proved myself useful enough, something would eventually tip in my favor. Not praise, just neutrality. A room where I didn't feel like I was apologizing for existing. Back then, I hadn't learned the difference between being needed and being valued. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment near uptown Charlotte. Clean, sparse. A couch, a drafting table by the window plants I remembered to water because they were the only living things that depended on me without conditions. My days started before sunrise and ended whenever the site supervisors stopped calling. I built things that stayed standing. Concrete, steel, deadlines. None of that impressed my parents. Every Saturday night, like clockwork, my phone would buzz. "Dinner at 6. Don't be late. Your sister's coming." Lily had moved back home after college temporarily. That temporary stretched into years cushioned by my parents' pride and the excuse that she was finding her brand. She slept in the room I'd grown up in, the one with the bigger closet. At dinner, she held court. She talked about collaborations that hadn't signed yet, trips she might take, ideas she was manifesting. My mother listened like every word was a prophecy. My father nodded along, already convinced. "People like her," he'd say, "she's got presence." Presence. Another word that never applied to me. I tried at first. I mentioned a project once, an affordable housing build we'd finally secured funding for. I explained how the design cut costs without sacrificing safety, how the families moving in wouldn't have to choose between rent and groceries. My mother smiled politely. "That's nice, Claire." Then she turned back to Lily. "Did you tell them about the photo shoot?" That was when I stopped trying to compete. I learned to eat quietly, to leave early, to show up just enough that no one could accuse me of distance. Distance to them was betrayal, but silence was acceptable as long as it was mine. When I skipped dinners, my mother called to check in. "Your sister's really taking off," she'd say casually. Or, "You could learn something from how she puts herself out there." I'd agree. It was easier. My father was quieter. He'd ask about work sometimes, but the moment my answer turned technical, he tuned out. His approval lived in numbers. He understood followers, likes, applause, and Lily had plenty of those. Then came the first call. It was late. I was half asleep when my phone rang. My mother's name lit up the screen. She didn't waste time. "Your father made a mistake," she said. Her voice sounded small, unsteady. I'd never heard it like that. A bad investment, a friend of a friend. Something about property flipping that went sideways. I sat up the sheets tangled around my legs, listening as the details blurred together. "They're talking about foreclosure," she whispered. "We just need a little help to get through this part." A little help. I didn't ask how much. I didn't ask why Lily wasn't on the line. I didn't ask why no one had mentioned any of this sooner. I opened my banking app. I transferred the money I'd been saving for a down payment. Years of careful planning vanished with a single tap. My mother cried, thanked me, promised it was temporary. My father called the next morning. His voice was steady again, controlled. "I appreciate this," he said. "Not thank you. I appreciate this. Like I'd done my job." Weeks passed. Then another call. The bank needed more time, another payment, just until things stabilized. My spreadsheet sat open on my laptop as she talked. Rows of numbers, goals, all of it suddenly irrelevant. I sent more money. After that, I stopped counting. What mattered, I told myself, was keeping the house. The house meant stability. The house meant family. The bank called me directly a month later. They were polite, professional, too calm. They asked if I'd consider becoming a cosigner, a guarantor. Just paperwork, they said. A formality. When I mentioned it to my mother, she didn't hesitate. "You're the responsible one," she said. "They'll take us more seriously if it's you." "Not us. Me." I went to the branch on my lunch break. Fluorescent lights, beige walls. The banker smiled as he slid the documents across the desk. "You're doing a good thing," he said. "Not everyone steps up like this." I signed. I didn't tell Lily. I didn't tell my friends. At work, people talked about vacations and new cars. I nodded along, smiling, calculating interest rates in my head. I told myself sacrifice was love. I told myself loyalty meant endurance. I told myself this was what families did. What I didn't realize was that I had quietly become the foundation everyone stood on without ever being acknowledged as such. The calls didn't stop. Sometimes they were updates. Sometimes they were panic disguised as calm. Always they ended the same way. Just one more thing, my mother would say. And I would say yes, because saying no felt like collapsing the entire structure. And I had been raised to believe that if something fell apart, it was my responsibility to hold it together. I started skipping dinners again. Not out of rebellion, out of exhaustion. Every visit drained something from me I couldn't name. When I did go, nothing had changed. Lily still talked. My parents still praised. I still sat at the end of the table, the chair leg still loose. One night I mentioned in passing that I'd delayed buying an apartment. My mother waved it off. "You're young. You have time." Lily laughed. "Yeah, Claire. Live a little." I smiled. The muscles in my face felt stiff. That was when I realized something fundamental. They didn't see my sacrifices as sacrifices. They saw them as baseline expectations. I was the net, the backup plan, the one who didn't need encouragement because I didn't need attention. I went home that night and sat in the dark, my phone face down on the table. The city lights outside blurred into soft streaks against the window. For the first time, I wondered what would happen if I stopped answering. I didn't test that question yet. I wasn't ready. I still believed foolishly that loyalty would eventually be met with fairness, that silence would be rewarded, that one day someone would notice the weight I'd been carrying and say, "Enough. You've done more than your share." That night at dinner, the one where my mother told me she wished I were more like my sister, I realized how wrong I was. Because when I finally spoke, when I finally stopped absorbing the blow and let it land outward instead, they didn't ask why. They asked why I was making things uncomfortable. That was the moment the illusion cracked. And once you see the structure clearly, who stands where, who benefits, who bleeds, you can't unsee it. You can only decide how much longer you're willing to hold it up. The first time I didn't answer the phone, my hands shook. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a site trailer reviewing revised timelines when my phone lit up with my mother's name. I stared at it longer than necessary, long enough for the buzzing to stop on its own. Silence rushed in. Thick, Unfamiliar. Nothing happened. No lightning. No collapse. The building outside my window didn't crumble because I let a call go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, a text came through. Just checking in. Call me when you can. I didn't. That night, another message. The bank is asking questions again. I slept anyway. For years, I had been conditioned to believe that urgency belonged to everyone else and responsibility belonged to me. That if I paused even briefly, everything would fall apart and I would be blamed for the noise. But the next morning, the sun came up like it always did. Traffic moved. Emails arrived. My life didn't implode. Something loosened in my chest. It didn't last. By the end of the week, the tone shifted. My mother's texts grew longer, softer, carefully worded. Your father hasn't been sleeping well. Stress is hard on his heart. We're just worried you're pulling away. Pulling away. That phrase landed heavier than it should have. It carried years of accusation wrapped in concern. Distance to them was abandonment. Boundaries were selfishness. Silence was punishment. I stayed quiet. Then Lily posted. It was subtle at first. A photo of my parents on the porch, my mother's hand on my father's arm. The caption read, "Family is everything." Even when not everyone remembers that. People commented with hearts, with praise, with assumptions. I recognized the pattern immediately. They were rewriting the story. In this version, Lily was loyal. My parents were victims. And I was absent. At work, things got strange. Conversation stopped when I walked into the break room. A colleague asked if everything was okay at home. Another offered an awkward smile that carried pity I hadn't earned. I didn't explain. Explaining had never helped before. The real hit came the following Monday. I was reviewing a proposal when the receptionist buzzed my extension. Her voice sounded unsure. "There's a man here asking for you," she said. "He says he's your father." My stomach dropped. I found him pacing the lobby, jaw-tight coat still on like he planned to leave angry. The moment he saw me, his face hardened. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" he demanded loud enough that two people looked over. I asked him to lower his voice. He didn't. "You think you can just disappear," he said. "After everything we did for you." There it was, the debt, the invisible ledger I'd been paying into my entire life. "We raised you," he continued. "We gave you stability. And now you're acting like this." I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not rage, humiliation. I looked around. Glass walls, curious eyes. This was not a private conversation. He knew that. Or maybe he didn't care. "I'm at work," I said quietly. "This isn't the place," he scoffed. Typical. Always hiding behind professionalism. Then he leaned in, voice low, sharp. "You'll regret this when you have no one left." That was his final weapon. Isolation. Fear. He walked out without waiting for a response. The rest of the day blurred. Whispers followed me down hallways. Someone avoided my gaze entirely. Another offered sympathy I didn't ask for. That night Lily posted again. This time there was no subtlety. "Some people only care about themselves," the caption read. "Even when family is struggling." The photo showed my parents at the kitchen table, heads bowed, dramatic lighting, carefully framed, comments flooded in. "She doesn't deserve you. Blood means nothing to some people. You're so strong for staying." Staying. I stared at my phone until the words stopped registering. For the first time, anger replaced guilt. Not explosive anger. Focused. Clarifying. I sat at my desk long after everyone left the city, glowing beyond the windows. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the folder I hadn't touched in months. Mortgage statements, payment confirmations, signed agreements. Every document told the same story. My name, my account, my responsibility. I spread the papers across the desk one by one. The timeline was undeniable. When the payments stopped coming from my parents, they'd come from me. When the bank needed reassurance, they'd called me. When the house stayed standing, it was because I had held it up. They hadn't mentioned that part online. They hadn't mentioned it at work. They hadn't mentioned it at dinner. They had taken my silence and built a lie on top of it. I locked the folder back into the drawer. My hands were steady now. That night, I drafted an email to the bank. I asked about removing my name from the guarantor agreement, about separating my credit from the mortgage entirely, about timelines, consequences, legal paths. The response came the next morning. It wouldn't be easy, they said. It would take meetings, documentation, possibly legal counsel. I scheduled everything anyway. When my mother found out the calls started again, her messages were no longer soft. "How could you do this to us? This will destroy your father. You're being cold. Cold." I didn't reply. Then the emails came. Long, detailed, emotional. Each sentence carefully designed to pull me back into my role. "We never asked for this much from you. You're imagining things. You're twisting the narrative. Gaslighting wrapped in maternal concern." I archived them. The final message arrived late one night. "If you go through with this, don't expect things to ever be the same." I stared at the screen. Things had never been fair, never balanced, never safe for me. Sameness was the problem. I typed one sentence, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. In the end, I didn't send anything. Silence had become my language, and for the first time, it wasn't weakness. It was control. A week later, an invitation appeared on my phone. From Lily, a launch event, a celebration, a milestone moment, as she called it. Live-streamed, sponsored, public. The caption beneath the invite read, "Couldn't have done this without family." I stared at the screen, then at the locked drawer beneath my desk. For the first time, I didn't feel dread. I felt clarity. They wanted a story. They'd built one without me. And they'd chosen the stage. They just didn't realize I was done being silent. The invitation sat unanswered for 3 days. A glossy digital card, white text, gold accents. Lily's name centered like a brand, not a person. Launch night, a celebration of growth. At the bottom, live, public, by RSVP only. I didn't respond. Not yes, not no. Silence has weight when you let it sit. In the meantime, I met with a lawyer. A small office uptown. Neutral walls. No family photos on the desk. She read through the documents without reacting, which told me everything. "You're not a guarantor in spirit," she said finally. "You're the backbone. They just didn't tell you." She explained timelines, options, the consequences of staying attached versus cutting clean. None of it was emotional. None of it was personal. That was the relief. I signed what needed signing, initialed where required. My name moved slowly, deliberately across paper that finally worked for me instead of against me. When I left, the air outside felt different, not lighter, sharper, like a cold morning that wakes you up instead of numbing you. The backlash came fast. My mother stopped pretending. Her texts lost punctuation, lost softness. "Do you enjoy hurting us? Your sister is under so much stress. This isn't who we raised." I read them once, then again. Then I stopped. My father sent a single email, short, direct. "You've embarrassed this family." I stared at it longer than I should have. Embarrassment, not betrayal, not confusion, not concern. Image. That told me everything I still needed to know. At work, the whispers faded. Not because people understood, but because something else took their attention. Lily's posts had become louder, more frequent, more polished. She leaned into the narrative, behind-the-scenes videos, emotional captions, carefully cropped photos of my parents looking tired, worried, brave. The comments were predictable. "You're holding it together so well. They're lucky to have you. Some siblings don't deserve a seat at the table." I watched the story harden into something solid enough for strangers to defend. Still, I said nothing. Not because I didn't care, because I finally understood that defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you only feeds the lie. The night before the event, my mother called again. I let it ring, then go to voicemail. Her message was sharp, clipped the way she spoke when she wanted control back. "If you're planning to do something stupid tomorrow," she said, "don't. This is Lily's moment. Don't ruin it." Ruin. I deleted the message. The next evening I went anyway, not in response to the invite, not to support, not to confront. I went because the truth doesn't need permission. The venue was downtown, glass walls, white lights, everything reflective, everything designed to be seen, people dressed like success, clean lines, confident laughter, champagne flutes clinking in easy celebration. Lily stood near the center, radiant practice surrounded by people who only knew her through a screen. My parents sat in the front row, close enough to be framed as part of the brand. Family sells well. I stayed near the back. Black dress. No logo. No accessories that caught the light. I didn't want to be noticed yet. The event started on time. An MC introduced Lily with a voice trained for hype. A montage played on the screen behind her photos, clips captions about resilience, authenticity, growth. She stepped forward to applause. "My journey," she said, smiling, "hasn't been easy, but I've been so lucky to have support." She gestured toward my parents. The camera followed. More applause. "I wouldn't be here without family," she continued, "without the sacrifices they made." The word sacrifice echoed. I felt something settle in my chest, heavy, solid. She talked about struggle, about staying positive, about people who couldn't understand her vision. She didn't say my name. She didn't need to. I walked forward as the applause rose again, not rushing, not hesitating. The MC noticed me when I reached the edge of the stage, confused, polite. "I have something that belongs here," I said, handing him a slim folder. He hesitated. Lily's smile faltered just slightly. "What's this?" she asked. "Context," I said. The screen behind her flickered. Documents appeared. Clean scans, dates, numbers, property records, payment histories, my name, again and again. The room went silent in layers. Whispers started near the back. Phones lifted. The live stream kept rolling. Lily turned, reading her face draining of color. My mother looked down at her hands. My father didn't move at all. "This," I said calmly, "is what support actually looks like. No yelling, no accusation, just facts." The MC stepped back uncertain. The documents continued to cycle. I didn't wait for applause. I turned and walked out. Behind me the silence cracked, then noise, then chaos. Outside the night was cool, clean, honest. I stood under a streetlight and breathed, really breathed. My phone buzzed immediately. Messages, missed calls, notifications exploding all at once. I didn't open any of them. For the first time, the story wasn't mine to carry. I had set it down in public where it belonged. And as I walked to my car, one thought cut through everything else, clear, unshakable. They didn't lose me tonight. They lost control, and that was something they would never get back. The silence afterward was louder than anything that came before. I didn't read the messages that night. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I let my phone sit face down on the kitchen counter while I stood at the window watching the city breathe without me. By morning, the video was everywhere. Clips from the live stream cut and reposted, screenshots of documents frozen mid-scroll, headlines written by strangers who suddenly understood the story better than my family ever had. Influencer's launch event, interrupted by sisters' receipts. Quiet backer exposes financial truth behind viral brand. The comments shifted fast. The same people who had praised Lily's strength deleted their words. Others replaced them with questions, doubt, silence. Sponsors pulled out quietly. No public statements, just contracts that stopped renewing, invitations that evaporated. My parents didn't call that day. They didn't call the next. When they finally did, it wasn't to apologize. It was to negotiate. My mother left a voicemail that sounded tired in a way performance couldn't fake. "We need to talk," she said. "You went too far. Too far. Not was any of it untrue. Not why didn't we listen. Just damage control." I didn't respond. A week later, the house went up for sale. No announcement, no explanation. Just a listing that showed up on a real estate app one quiet Sunday morning. The same house I'd saved, the same porch light I remembered flickering. They sold quickly. I heard they moved out of state, somewhere cheaper, somewhere quieter, somewhere without neighbors who whispered. Lily disappeared from social media for a while. When she returned, the captions were vague, the confidence dulled, the numbers didn't bounce back. Success built on silence doesn't survive truth. As for me, I finished the legal separation cleanly. Final signatures, final confirmations. The bank letter arrived in a plain envelope. I placed it in a folder labeled "Closed" and didn't look back. Work changed too, not overnight, not dramatically. But the way people looked at me shifted. Not pity anymore. Respect, distance, understanding. I took a job offer in New York 2 months later. Smaller firm, bigger autonomy. No one there knew my last name beyond what was on my badge. That mattered. My new studio was a single room above a flower shop in Brooklyn. Exposed brick, one window, bare floors, mine. The first client was a couple rebuilding after a fire. Standing in that half-finished space, light spilling across raw beams, I felt something settle into place. I wasn't just designing buildings anymore. I was practicing repair. A journalist reached out later, wanted an interview. Independence, boundaries, women choosing themselves. I declined the family questions. Some stories don't need retelling, they need releasing. When she asked if I ever expected an apology, I told her the truth. Respect doesn't come from apologies, I said. It comes from limits. At night, when the city quieted and the studio lights reflected off the glass, I thought about how far I'd come, not in distance, but in dignity. I used to believe love meant endurance, that loyalty meant silence. That being needed was the same as being valued. I know better now. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to explain yourself. It's to stand up, put the truth down where everyone can see it, and walk away without asking anyone to understand. Freedom doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it comes in a quiet room, a locked drawer, and the moment you realize you no longer owe anyone your peace.